Hello everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. I will make sure to turn off my music this time. Welcome to the Thursday edition of my bi-weekly behind-the-scenes DM-only livestream crafting Icewind Dale, in which I build, write, and prepare for our next session of Rime of the Frostmaiden. If you are playing characters of Robin, Frey, Celeste, Edmund, or Thimbleweed, this isn't the right stream for you. But for the rest of you, welcome. There will be spoilers. Numerous sessions live on YouTube every Friday. Watch all of our D&D sessions and reviews here on YouTube. You can follow me on Twitter at Rogue Watson and join our official Discord server with invite link in the description below. If you'd like to support the channel, please check out patreon.com/RogueWatson. For our campaign, we use Roll20.net for streaming. I use Open Broadcaster software with Streamlabs. I hope I sound okay. I think I'm got congested all over again, which is just all kinds of frustrating since I feel like I've been suffering from something off and on for the last like 2 months, and I used to like never get sick. It's really, really annoying. I don't know if it's just post-COVID era or me just getting older and just having young children around, but again, it's very, very frustrating, especially when I have to do videos as part of what I do, and I'm very self-conscious about me snorting and sounding all nasally and crappy, so hopefully you don't get too much of that. I think this will probably be the last time we end up talking about mostly the Caves of Hunger, because I do want to try to get ahead of things and jump in and talk about Ithrin in future crafting videos, even though I think the party will be in the Caves of Hunger for many more sessions. I think bare minimum we're probably looking at 3 or 4 more sessions, I would expect, especially with the way some of these battles might take a long time. The battle we've got coming up, and then, you know, going into the whole vampire area could be a while. And then bare minimum, I think we've got like a session going into the lower right corner. It's as if we skip the Remoraz fight, because I think that Remoraz fight could be a whole session too, before making it down into the Dryad area with the Nothics, and then finally getting the hell out of here. So even ignoring the lower left corner with the Drow, I think it would still be several sessions before we get out of the Caves of Hunger, which is fine. I like this. It's a big dungeon. It's suitably creepy, and there's a lot of stuff going on. We had talked about last time on a Monday stream, sorry I'm scrolling up and down a lot because it's a big ass map, about replacing the mummy in room H33, which is the Watcher in the Walls, which I'd forgotten the way this room starts is the players actually walk into this room and they hear a tapping on the wall. So that means they're actually drawn. It's not like there's this thing they suddenly discover and they might realize they can interact with, but they realize this thing is actually alive in some cases. Now, as written, it's a mummy, which still feels kind of out of place to me, that it's just this undead servant in the library of Ithrin, which is where it comes from, versus you've already got a bunch of servants that are literally magical constructs that are all over Ithrin, which are these Magen. And I thought it would be a really fun way to tease these kind of creatures if we put one that was stuck in the ice here. And of course, the way that you draw the players in, which this is not me, this is actually written in the book, is that this one is for some reason wearing a golden face mask worth 750 gold pieces. So in other words, you give it a piece of loot that the players would be very interested in grabbing. Is on, let's see, H33. There we go. Treasure. The mummy's golden mask is a Netherese art object worth 750 gold pieces. So I'm going to replace the mummy. I'm kind of keeping everything as is in this room, but I'm going to replace the mummy with a Hypnos Magen. There are 3 flavors of Magen. There's kind of your generic warrior. There's a offensive wizard type, and then there is this. Why is it not? There it is. Got the tab open somewhere. And there's kind of a, I guess, a crowd controller, which can cast the suggestion spell. And as written, this thing is supposed to just kind of work in the library of Ithrin. And it interestingly does not attack the party when it's released, which a lot of players would probably expect. Nor can it communicate with them, which is a little disappointing. Specifically, it says that, I believe this is true of all Magen, by the way, they can understand the language of their creators, but cannot speak, which there are a couple of creatures that are like that. Like a lot of the golem-type creatures. But it says it has telepathy to 30 feet. So does that mean it can communicate? I'm actually not sure, because that's kind of a big deal if this creature can communicate or not. I feel like it's more interesting. Let's look at a different Magian. Maybe it's just that Hypnos has telepathy. Understands language greater and can't speak. Galvin. Same one, okay. Hypnos Magian does have telepathy, but I think, you know, it's probably because it can cast Suggestion, actually. So it would need to be a creature Magian. Okay, the target must be a creature the Magian can communicate with telepathically. So that's why I bet they had to give it some way to cast Suggestion. But I think I'm going to change this, and because I think it's more interesting if they can't speak, but they, you know, like Silent Servants, but they can understand. But I would still let it be able to cast Suggestion. It's just, it's a psychic compulsion that it can still use. I might have to change the wording on that a bit then, because just for the purposes of gathering information and things. I think it's a lot more interesting if these things can't understand, and yet, and they're not truly alive. They are constructs. They literally like bleed mercury, and when they die, they disintegrate in a harmless burst of fire and smoke. Now I'm thinking about changing that. A, because my players are higher level, and B, because as I mentioned on Monday, I'm reading the Dragonlance book, and I do love the effect that the Draconians, which are the main shock troopers of the villains in Dragonlance, all have cool effects happen when they die, kind of like Mephits. And I think that would be a good excuse to maybe have something happen when they die, maybe. And I was thinking to go with the theme of their magical constructs created by mages. Maybe when they die, they cast Dispel Magic, so it's like their energy of you know, whatever spell was used to, you know, animate them and construct them. When they die, it kind of explodes in a burst of energy, which has the Dispel Magic effect. That one gets tricky because technically if it's a spell of 4th level or higher, you have to make an ability check. So would I just roll as if they were casting Dispel Magic, or would I just say, hey, it's just 3rd level or lower spells that they would dispel, and then what kind of radius would I give it? So I need a few more firm rules on that, but I thought that was an interesting opportunity, just because I think it's interesting when creatures have some kind of effect happen when they die, especially the first time the players discover that, and then in the future they're like, oh, now we have to actually, like, you know, position ourselves in certain ways where we're not hit by this effect. Now, in a lot of cases, Dispel Magic probably isn't going to matter much. You know, I could give it a 30-foot range, which is pretty good, but it's really only going to affect people who buff themselves, so people that have, like, haste. Or it could work that if one dies, for example, if Valravn casts the slow spell, you could have, I guess it'd have to dispel. How does that work, actually? When you dispel it, I guess you could dispel it on the person casting the spell, which would dispel all of it, or could you dispel it on just certain creatures that it was affecting, and then it would just dispel that effect on that creature. It says choose one creature, object, or magical effect within range. I'm sure there's a ruling on that, so I don't know if that's ever come up before, where somebody casts Dispel Magic, and typically you would just cast it on that magical effect, so it would just end the entire effect. But what if the caster is actually outside of the range, and somebody's casting it on somebody's being affected like that? For example, and I guess haste isn't a good example, because if you dispel it on the person who's being affected by haste, then it is effectively dispelled, because haste was only on there. But slow could, you know, affect multiple people. Same thing like a bless spell or something. And what if you cast what if Dispel Magic was only cast on those people and not the caster? Would it still be available for some people, or would it just end that entire effect? I'm not actually sure about that. I'd have to look that up. But I thought that'd be kind of interesting to be able to shut off any buffs or debuffs kind of chaotically, because it wouldn't even be something I'm smartly triggering. It would just be a result of their deaths. Would be all the Magians would have the Dispel Magic effect. So I thought that'd be a cool little fly in the ointment for facing these creatures, and something the players could discover upon destroying one of them. Now this one, so it's tapping on the walls, and you know, it's trapped behind the ice. I did not have Mage in the Last Spire, actually, Jason. I used Dizon and a bunch of his clones and everything else, but I did not use Magens then. It might have been a good excuse for it, but I kind of had a lot going on there. I didn't need anything extra, and it was pretty much a tiny dungeon. Really not much more I could do with it. So it's trapped in the ice, and the players can choose to just walk away and not interact with it completely, which would obviously be a little disappointing, and I doubt they would do that. Or they can choose to try to free this creature because, again, it's just in black robes and it's got this golden face mask. And I like that from the outset they can't determine like what this thing is, why it's still alive, like any kind of those questions. And if they try to communicate with it, they won't be able to, even though, and it won't be able to understand them because there's a language barrier there. Because it can only understand Loros. So if they decide to free it, which they can, the ice has, various stats that they can easily bust down. It's hardly even worth mentioning. They can just break it down without even really making attack rolls. They can free it, and then, as written in the book, I guess it just preternaturally knows the way home. It says if the wall is reduced to 0 hit points, the mummy is released and makes its way to area H39, which is the lower right corner of the map where players need to go. And then from there to the library in Ithrin, which is area Y9 in Chapter 7. It ignores the characters unless they interfere with it, which I like. I like the fact that they free this thing. They have no idea what it is. They can't communicate with it. And like a robotic servant on autopilot, it just goes towards Ithrin. Why does it know that? It never explains how it knows the location and how did it get trapped here in the first place? That's kind of all up to me, I guess. I like the fact that the Magen, maybe they do kind of know. They have like a little bit of awareness, or maybe they feel like a connection to Ithrin, so they would go towards it. But fascinatingly enough, and again, the players don't know this, that would lead them effectively to where they need to go. They have no idea about that. Now, funny enough is if they try to jack with this thing at all, if they try to grab it, if they try to physically take the mask or anything like that, that will start a combat encounter, which is not meant to be a hard one at all. I mean, this is a single Magen, which again is a fun tease because later they'll find them in groups. But a single Hypnos Magen is CR1. I could maybe get off I would definitely get off a surprise round and surprise them if they did try to do something. It would do probably its Psychic Clash or something would be the most effective thing, although melee attack plus 0. Oh, it's a wait, saving throw, that's why. So this needs to not be an attack. This kind of been put in wrong. There we go. Magen's eyes glow silver. As targets one creature it can see within 60 feet of it. Target must succeed on a DC 12 wisdom saving throw or take 2d10 psychic damage, which is pretty solid, although DC 12 is very, very low. Let's just get rid of it here, because I actually like doing it there, so it'll show up a little bit better if we do it this way, I think. There we go. It's yeah, that's pretty low damage, so they don't really have to worry about that thing. I mean, it could use suggestion, but I don't know what it would suggest. I feel like if it's being attacked, it would use Psychic Clash before it uses suggestion. Suggestions, like, I like the fact that if it works in a library, it literally does the, like, shh, it, like, decides to, like, silence people, like, don't speak. Which would be pretty crazy, because it could do that. But I think it would only do that maybe in the confines of the library, so I don't actually see it using its suggestions, but I think I would just use Psychic Clash. But if it dies, I would do the Dispel Magic effect, so that would kind of tease the players to the effects of these creatures. But otherwise, they would have really no context here. It's just a kind of a tease, and then they can figure it out. Maybe I could have somebody roll history or Arcana checks. Arcana probably, because, in fact, we have our house rolls. Can they determine based on what this thing is? I'd probably do disadvantage, though, because it's such a foreign concept. Construct would normally be Arcana. That's great. So I could probably write down, hey, with an Arcana check with disadvantage, you could try to figure out what this thing is, and it's just, a magical created humanoid that looks like ancient, I say technology, but it's like arcane magic. Ancient arcane magic has created this thing. And it appears to be some kind of a servant. But I do like adding that kind of dispel magic death throw ability, death burst is what they call it in like Hearthstone. Some effect that goes off when they die. So we're going to place that, and then I've even got the token not on the map, so they can't even see it, so they think maybe it's just a whole RP thing, and then once this thing is on the map, then I can use that. Unfortunately, I don't have a good token to use. I don't have a good golden face mask. Maybe it might be worth finding one, and then I can switch to this one so they can see that it's like this weird, like, blue, translucent blue skin. Yeah, this one has like the coolest picture, I think. It looks very much like a creepy humanoid construct, but I don't want to use this token because this would be totally obstructed by the mask, I think. It would be this giant like ceremonial face mask it's wearing, so it wouldn't be able to see like what's going on underneath, which is also a good tease for them to want to jack with that mask so they can try to, you know, figure out what they're dealing with, and then it would turn around and start attacking them. So on the low chance the players just let it be, maybe they'll follow it, in which case it would be interesting. Thankfully, it's an H33, so most likely they've already explored, you know, some parts of these other caverns in 34 and 35. 35 has the surprise mimic. 34 just has a bunch of Chardolin in there, and then 31, which is how you get here, has the cool thing in the ice, which I mentioned. I'm going to also hide that on the dynamic lighting layer and only reveal it when they get within 20 feet, and then I'm going to change it where it still does its dominate monster thing, but if anybody jacks with that player, then the thing that has been brought through the far realm attempts to control the player. They've already been zapped with dominate monster, and then it's like probing their minds, and if somebody jacks with them, then they have to make an intelligence save, and if they succeed, then they will attack their compatriot because they've been ordered to. If they fail, then their just mind is just turned to mush because of the alien language trying to control them, and they just take psychic damage. And then either way, after all that ends, they're going to have to roll on the madness chart. So it's going to be all kinds of bad news to come this way that the players will not really have a way of dealing with. And I believe it does say they can break through this wall. And if they do so, that will make the creature retreat. But if anybody gets within 20 feet, they are still being subjected to that effect, which is pretty much anywhere once they get halfway through this room. I like that effect because that should be pretty nasty for them. It's just a bunch of nasty stuff. But if they allow this Magen to walk, it will just walk down the tunnels. I guess going back technically to H32, which is the mirrored cavern, which I'm going to have a psychic haunting in there. A lot of opportunity to get madness. And this is going to be the creepy like horror thing where you go in and you see a bunch of mirrors that have distorted reflections, and then I'll do a creepy thing about faces falling apart and frostbite taking over, and then that will be triggering a psychic haunting. The Magen will make its way all the way down to the Dryad room, and then it's going to get a bit awkward because I don't know how to interact the Dryad room with the Magen with all the players coming through. I think the Magen would it would probably recognize all this stuff and know like, and the Dryad would recognize it, and maybe I can even do like a tease, like the Dryad could speak. Although the Dryad wouldn't the Dryad also speak in Laros? Is that not actually clarified in its stat block or anything? Because it was created by them. I think it was created. That up too. Let's see. The Grove's survival. Essentially, the Grove's survival is a Dryad named Hathawin who resides in the southernmost tree. It doesn't actually mention the trees were enchanted by Netherese arcanists. But supposedly the Dryad's also ancient, right? Elvish and Sylvan. Okay. I guess Elvish is a very old language, so the Dryad would be able to know Elvish. Anyone who speaks Elvish can understand spoken Laros. You know, that's actually, thank you, Jason. That is true. And that was something that well, actually, that's something I changed a bit for the head, right? That was the head repeated language in both languages. Where does it say that about? Have a page number for me for that. That does seem familiar. I know it's the head that speaks. Which one was the head in? Get to another uses the draconic script for written languages, which we did. There we go. Laros, the Netherese tongue. Spoken by the Netherese is a dead tongue. Very few creatures in the world today would recognize it, much less speak it. Laros uses the draconic alphabet in its written form, while the spoken language has many similarities with Elvish due to the cultural influence the elves had on Netherese civilization. A character who speaks Elvish can understand what a creature speaking Laros is saying, and vice versa. It's so straight up. Elvish is effectively the same language. Okay. So I actually did that wrong when I did the golem head. Communicate building the lights and it's through mixed. I don't know. It understands Elvish and Laros. Okay. Oh, that's right, because the head as written doesn't actually speak, and I had to interject that. Okay. I did mess that up a little bit. That Elvish would be able to effectively understand Laros. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean, well, let's see, can it be understand the creature speaking? It does say vice versa. So actually, somebody speaking Elvish would be able to communicate with the Magian. The problem is, the Magian can't speak itself, so it still wouldn't be able to provide any information. And the Dryad would be able to speak Elvish, and that is going to be the font of their information. So the Dryad could speak Elvish, maybe to the Magian. Maybe she could be a tease, like, oh, and maybe she would even recognize. I don't know what the context of that would be. I'd have to figure that out. But maybe I could have a fun scene planned there, a special scene that would trigger if they actually make it to where the Magian ends up getting as far as H36, which is the Dryad's Grove, and then have, you know, the trees. Again, the players don't know what's happening. Maybe the trees can communicate and say, like, oh, you know, guardian of scripts and tomes, you are lost. Can you find your way home? You know, with the trees saying that, and then the Magian could stop and kind of look around and nod, and then continue on towards this southern tunnel, and then go down there, which might clue the players in. And like, oh shit, this thing is going home to roost. It can, Jason. You might have missed the very beginning, but I did mention the fact that I think I'm gonna not have it be able to do that, because I think it's. I think the reason its stat block can do that specific. Most Magian cannot. The Hypnos can. I think specifically because it can, so that it can cast the suggestion spell. But I think I'm gonna reflavor that to where it can't speak, because I think that's just more interesting. And yeah, I think the really only reason it was given telepathy was so it can technically cast the suggestion spell. But I would just reflavor that as you just feel like this kind of psychic compulsion, without necessarily it having to speak or even telepathically speak through you to suggest something. In fact, I was even saying, like, maybe the only thing it can do, because it works in the library, is to like do that shush maneuver to silence people. So in that case, it's not even speaking anything, it's just kind of making a gesture, and then the way the spell works, you still understand that that means you have to, you know, not speak for the duration of however long this thing wants to concentrate on it. Or it can maybe point, you know, to leave or something. Like, it has very simple, like, suggestion, almost like commands at that point. So that's how I'd reflavor it. But otherwise, no, I wouldn't let people. I like these things way more as silent, you know, guardians and stewards and servants of Ethrin that don't have any speaking roles, because I think there's plenty of opportunity for more interesting creatures like this Dryad that the players can interact with in Ethrin and right before Ethrin, which is the Dryad here. So I think having a scene prepared for case the Magian actually makes it that far is going to be important. Is H36 the Frozen Grove? So I'm going to make all these things because I really didn't work too much on this campaign during the break. Frozen Grove. Goes through Grove as a way, and at that point the players can choose either keep following the Magian, because the Magian is not going to stop. You know, it doesn't obey regular rules in terms of, you know, having to communicate or eat or drink or rest or anything like that. It just keeps on going all the way until it makes it to the library, really. I'm not prepared necessarily for if the players continue to just ignore everything and follow the Magian right into Ethrin. That would be a little interesting. I would expect they'd want to stop and like interact with the Grove and maybe allow the Magian to continue on. The nice thing is I think it mentions there's like a mile for it to go. It's not like you just hop, skip, and a jump to Ethrin. I'm gonna have to look back up at H39. But I guess that is a possibility. They could ignore everything and just and say like, we need to prioritize following this creature now. And again, if they try to slow it down, they try to stop it, that's when it actually stops and attacks. And at that point, the players have kind of screwed up. Now, what happens if they stop it, an attack breaks out, and they want to end the fight? I ask myself the important questions. They would obviously have to speak Elvish, and they would have to probably make a... And that might be a chance for Volravin to shine again, is have to make some kind of persuasion check and be like, you know, oh, we apologize profusely for this, you know, mistake and all that. And then maybe they can end the fight that. So I may allow that. We'll see how it goes. I'm willing to be flexible now. Tunnel of Ice cuts through the glacier for almost a mile, before ending at the great ice cavern that contains Ithrin, as described in the Necropolis of Ithrin. They go for an hour and then appear at the that icy bridge. I guess I may need to have like the first scene or so planned in case they make it that far. But I mean, they're not gonna make it that far this session. What am I doing? They're not gonna make it that far. But whenever they do get as far as making it to this right side, I do need to probably have that first scene of Ithrin prepped just in case they end up freeing this thing and ignoring all else to follow it all the way to the end, because the Dryad would definitely try to interact with them, but I don't know if she would necessarily physically try and stop them with like entangle spells or something. Or maybe she would. Maybe that's my way of stopping them. Her stat block is not terribly impressive, but she is very lonely, and she does have the entangle spell, and can maybe use that to slow people down and tell them to come back. And then she's got information. She could technically tell them about the drow, though I'm almost tempted to skip the drow completely, because I feel like once they get to here, we've gotten through a lot of the Caves of Hunger already. But I guess there could still be some interesting story opportunities there. And she would be able to inform them that she senses that Ithrin's pretty close. She suspects it's down this tunnel, but she can't leave her trees. She'd be able to tell them there's a vampire running around, but the players have 90% chance they've already dealt with that because it's right up where they are previously. And then she's seen some monsters roaming around recently that maybe chase the drow out. And then kind of on cue, as if to do that, I can have a bunch of these Nothics kind of rush in during that scene and kind of break up that scene with a fight, and then just have the Dryad kind of disappear inside the trees and hide. I don't know if she would be much of a combatant at that point. I don't see the Nothics being I'm very weirded out by the fact that the module wants to turn these Nothics into a social encounter, when in fact they are thousands of years old. They've been mutated monstrosities, and they're like driven insane. Like, I think using them as just feral monsters feels better here, especially when you literally have... If it was a long time since you've had a social scene, then yeah, I can see you doing that. But literally, this Dryad is like the biggest social scene of this entire dungeon, and you're going to put another one like right next to it is not great pacing in my mind. I think H38 is just empty, is that right? Yeah. These are empty. One of them might contain a psychic haunting. Maybe. I feel like at that point I've triggered a good chunk of them, but otherwise I think they're just kind of a safe area to rest in. And yeah, 37 was the Nothics. I increased it from 4 to 5. I did give the Nothics a ability from the Alep. So they've got now a Whisper of Paranoia. They can target... It's a little bit of a downgrade from what the Alep can do. Target must succeed on a DC 12. It's a range of 60, and they just target somebody with a DC 12 Wisdom saving throw. Otherwise, they take psychic damage, and they have to use their reaction to make a melee weapon attack against one creature of the Nothic's choice. That's kind of a cool 1-2 effect. It is their entire action. It is a Wisdom save where nothing happens if they succeed, although I could make it so maybe they at least take half psychic damage. I always like that because it sucks if... It does feel bad to use a creature's action and not be able to do anything, so maybe I actually will add that on there. If the save is successful, Target takes half damage and does not use its reaction. So that seems pretty standard. That way you at least get some value out of it if they make the save, which again is a pretty low save. But you've got a lot of these creatures that could potentially do it. They also still have their Rotting Gaze, just in case I wanted to target Con instead of Wiz, which is also at range. That one's 30 feet. I wonder if I should change the Whispers to 30 feet. Rather than 60 feet. Because all the other stuff is 30 feet. I'm also going to downgrade that to 30 feet. I don't think it's going to matter in the scheme of things. These are all pretty tight areas they're fighting in. Boy, one thing I'm going to need to come up with, though, are some Ithrin like city street maps, because while I am using the expanded towers of Ithrin from the DM's Guild to provide maps for all the towers, the module does not provide any maps for just running around Ithrin and having random encounters just anywhere in the city. In fact, I think the only map that is actually provided in the module is the last area that the players are trying to get to, which is the Spire of Orolithus. This is the only battle map that is provided, which is, I think, the final area. Is that where the Mythalar is kept? I don't remember exactly. Otherwise, you just get this kind of Omu-style map. You don't even get, Omu, if you recall, the Tomb of Annihilation actually came with a whole bunch of little shrine maps. It was like one map, on Roll20 at least, it was one map, and it had all the little shrines on there, which was very helpful. All the shrines were cool looking. But in terms of just walking around and all these different areas that could use maps, like there's like a bazaar, there's a well, there's this chain lightning arena. There's all these potential areas where you could have encounters in addition to the towers themselves, which would all definitely be areas the players would want to explore. But still, it would be useful to have and I wouldn't want to abuse this too much at all. But I think it'd be helpful to have some maps for these in between areas. I'm going to stream if you want to use it. Ooh, let me know, Jason. Yeah, I'll check it out. Because I find it very challenging to figure out like what do I even like search for, or because you look up like necropolis and it's a lot of like tombs, and that's not right. You look up ancient city and it's a lot of like just crumbling ruins, and I don't feel like that's entirely right. So trying to find like the map tile set I'm looking for has been very challenging when I'm just looking at the Roll20 marketplace, for example. I don't know if it's like I need to look at like sci-fi. Like it's a very unique looking thing. It's got like unique architecture, but it's all like frozen as well. So you could almost do, some of the street maps could just be like ice, but we've done ice to death, so I don't know how interesting that would be. But I've been struggling to try to find some just more generic maps for those kind of encounters for when we do Ithrin, which is coming up very soon, versus having this one big dungeon crawl where I don't have to do maps at all, which is awesome. That's why I love having big dungeon crawls in Roll20, because that whole problem is no longer a problem. But here it is going to definitely be a problem. And Omu, I did the same thing. I had to find maps for the street level. I do plan on using this map, and there is a player map that is provided, I believe. In fact, here I go talking about Ithrin. I said I wasn't gonna do that till next week. Yeah, so this map is provided, and all the annotations are on the GM layer, so you can put the players on here with the little D&D symbol, and kind of what I did with Omu, which is track their progress around the map. But obviously you're not using this to actually battle on. In fact, is this actually correct? By the way, the size is crazy on this thing. It's very small. Almost too small for a city. It's like 1 square mile. Look at this. If you look at it across, it's like 1,000 feet. I think that's less than a square mile, is it not? I mean, a mile's like 1,600 feet. So it's tiny. It's teeny tiny. Like, these buildings are, not very large for the most part. It doesn't feel like this. And I mean, it is a floating city and it's older, so I guess it feels appropriate to an ancient city where they weren't like, a ton of people, and they didn't have these sprawling, metropolis. It was generally pretty small. But it just, I don't know, it looks bigger on the map than I think it actually is. When you look at like, between, each individual tower, it's just a couple hundred feet. So it's almost, I think it's smaller than like a theme park would be, like the average theme park you'd walk around in. I feel like this is even smaller than that in a lot of cases. This might be more of like a state fair type situation, except it's just got buildings everywhere. So I thought that was a unique observation. I could always change it by upping the distance, I think. I guess I don't need to, but even what is this? Like this arena? It's only like, what is that, 150 feet? That doesn't seem like a huge arena at all. What is a football arena is 100 yards just for the actual field itself. That's going to be a lot larger. So yeah, I thought that was kind of weird that the whole city just feels a lot. I don't know what Omu was. I'd have to go back and look at Omu and see. First time seeing the stream live. Greetings from the Netherlands. Hey, greetings. Morning, Icewind Dale as well. I'm gonna try to pronounce the name, but I don't know. Sjord Masta. Is that a joke on Swordmaster? It took me a second until I actually pronounced it. Currently arriving at Zardarok's Fortress. Very cool. Sunblight's a really cool area, and probably remains one of my favorite parts of this campaign. I think it's the most well designed out of the box, to where I made like the least amount of adjustments and changes to it. And I think story-wise, it worked out really well in our campaign because we had one player basically take the reins using Disguise Self and did some really, really fun stuff in there that I think was absolutely delightful and very memorable. It also, at one point, featured us ending a session with the party having a 3-way split and then beginning the session with the party going into 3 different directions and accomplishing different things. That was, I think, a really memorable moment. So to me, Sunblight also had our first, like, I don't know how much I should spoil, actually, assuming you've been watching the streams, but I guess I won't say it. But it really some cool moments in there that I enjoyed a lot, and I think Sunblight works really well, and that whole first act can work very well. I have to sneeze. Oh, you got me so excited. Swear to goodness, I cannot shake. All of this snot has been so annoying. So annoying. Stick with me, though. I am powering my way through it. This has been the mildest one so far. Each one is more milder than the last, and eventually I will feel completely 100%. So yeah, I do plan on talking more about Ithrin. I think we're going to be able to get ahead of things, probably starting next week. And I think starting next week, I'm also going to start incorporating the actual expanded towers of Ithrin, which I'm actually, I think I mentioned this on Monday. I'm working with the designer, Daniel Kahn, to do the official Roll20 conversion of that module, which has now, I believe, been pushed back. They were going to release it in sometime in January. Now I think it's actually getting pushed back to February. The pushback being the ability to purchase the Roll20 version of a DM's Guild product on the DM's Guild. That is being rolled back, but I believe you can do that with Fantasy Grounds too. So it's kind of a similar situation where it's like, do you want the print, the physical version? Do you want the PDF, or do you want the digital store version for whatever this digital store is? And that could be either Fantasy Grounds or Roll20 or something. Starting in February for Roll20, and then I will be working on the actual. And it's awesome because I'm literally going to be using it in my campaign as well. So it just basically already doing the work. More work, obviously, because I'm putting together the journal stuff, which I don't usually do when I'm doing third-party stuff. I'll just read it off whatever PDF I'm using. But in terms of the maps and the dynamic lighting and the tokens and all that stuff, that will be pretty useful to have. I'm very much looking forward to Ithrin, but we still have more Caves of Hunger to talk about. And one thing I have really not talked about much in a couple weeks is where the players are immediately right now. Yes, they are doing official conversion. All of his stuff, I've got multiple people working on multiple modules. So I know I can't speak for every creator, but I know for his products, which he does a lot of the what have I reviewed so far? The Spelljammer one, which expanded Light of Xerxes. There was a Witchlight one that expanded like all 3 of those realms. And he's going to be having Roll20 versions of all of those, which will be awesome because then you can just plug them right into your stuff. And yeah, I've had to fudge a lot of that stuff as well, and it'll be really nice having that stuff available, because similar to Roll20, where, you know, I love having that stuff available on the marketplace, and you can just have it all ready to go, and holy crap, it is a gigantic time saver, and obviously well worth the money if you are going to be running this campaign, because it, you know, how many hours and hours and hours do we spend even in just one single area. We do have a hilarious cliffhanger left over from the last time we played, which was like 3 weeks ago, where the party were, most of them short rested except for Frey, who went on to investigate this kind of calling she had to eventually, that transformed her into a Wendigo. And the players discovered her, transformed, which was a cool horror moment. She did her giant cone fear attack, which blasted almost everybody. I think Valin and Edmund are the only ones who made the save. And at the same time, the actual villain of this cannibal subplot inside of the caves, which the players already dealt with all the shadows, is this Dread Wraith. Now, I didn't realize this thing, I think, is actually a Pathfinder creature. I just pulled it out of the Roll20 thing, but it's from whatever this source is. That Kingmaker? I mean, the Kingmaker I know is, let's see what the source is. Yeah, the Kingmaker Bestiary. Now, Kingmaker is a Pathfinder module. Who does not like that? So presumably this is just from that module, which I did not necessarily realize when I pulled it out. I mean, it's from the 5e conversion of that module, apparently, which is kind of cool. But I wanted a more powerful Wraith because the player's level 12, and I wanted not to have them fight Frey by herself, although this will be a very interesting fight because I have effectively taken one party member away and replaced that party member with a monster, which is the Ravenous Wendigo. Now, previously, when the party have dealt with her, it really hasn't been that bad because there's been either other enemies on the board or they've been able to shut her down pretty quickly. However, in this case, they start off with them all being frightened of her with the fear spell specifically, and then another basically giant mini-boss just came on the board. Now, a CR9, you know, normally it can be cause for hesitation, but this is a level 12 party. They have a lot of ways of dealing with it, and this particular creature has a neat effect where it can create dead creatures and turn them into wraiths, and then do this weird beam attack where it can do the wraith. And unfortunately, I think given what I've got going on here, I don't think it's actually going to be doing any of that. I think the only really things I'm going to be running this creature is going to be its life drain and its draining presence. The life drain is the exact same as a wraith, it's just more powerful. It's a +8 to hit. 3d10 plus 4 necrotic damage. They have to make a DC 15 con save, or its hit point max is reduced by an amount equal to the damage taken, which, I mean, 3d10 plus 4 is no fucking joke. If we want to look and see what a example of that looks like. See if I have my Dread Wraith pulled up. I do. Which, thankfully, you can just hide these messages, which I think is really helpful. So if we do that, that's a 26 to hit. That's going to hit everybody. That does 24 necrotic damage, which is big, and then also your max hit points are reduced by 24. That's nasty. It does not have multi-attack, however, so it does that once, and I'm not giving it legendary actions or anything, so it's just got that one ability. However, its other effect, oops, I hide each of these individually, is its draining presence, and this is a really nasty effect. So whenever a creature starts its turn within 10 feet of this thing, it must succeed on that same saving throw, the DC 15, or take 2d10 necrotic damage and have its hit point reduced by an amount equal to the damage taken. So literally it has its basic attack as kind of an ongoing effect around it, which is real nasty. It's weaker, it's only 2d10, but still, that is very scary for anybody to deal with. You don't want to be near this thing. You can actually change it where it'll make sure to actually roll that effect. And last until I finish a long rest on this one. The other ones with the shadows, I notice the strength drain only lasted to a short rest, but these hit point drains specifically last for a long rest. And I'm not... They could technically try and get a long rest in here. I would prefer if they dealt with the vampire first, and then if they did, I think they could get away with the long rest a lot easier. Versus if they long rest with the vampire still around, then I all of a sudden got to come up with like, all right, well, the vampire's hunting them. They can pop Leyland's tiny hut, so they can't really be jacked with, but maybe they can, you know, be ambushed after and have all these traps set up and all that. It's more work for me as a DM. versus letting them just long rest after they dealt with the vampire, and then I really don't have to have anything happen to them. Although I could have them have maybe an additional psychic haunting while they sleep. That could be a pretty easy effect to throw at them. Make sure this one shows up correctly. The creature starts from the 10 feet of the wraith, must get a DC 15. Yep, I take 5 necrotic damage, so that's not too bad. But it's ongoing every time. It's something I have to remember. It's when that creature starts its turn within 10 feet, which means after we roll initiative, it's everybody here, basically. The way I've positioned the wraith, which was of course strategic, everybody has to make that save on their turn. And I believe the fear spell, by the way, this is what I don't know, if I shift click Freya, it's not going to work. I need to go to the Wendigo, I think. Where did I put you? Oh, you're down here. I did give the Ravenous Wendigo a fear spell once per day. It can do that once. It also has Hold Person and has an at-will Misty Step. And there's a bunch of different multi-attacks it can do, which are pretty vicious. The Wendigo can even regain hit points. It can restrain people. It can make them cursed and cause them to attack other people. It does a bunch of cool effects. I remember last time she kept trying to do that Ravenous Hunger, and they kept trying to, and they made the save. Like, we just haven't had her be a really scary force, and I'm hoping this would be a more scary opportunity for them. Especially, and we can talk about if I actually want to add Tekalele to this fight or not. I can find fear, the fear spell. Excuse me. Creature must. Okay, this is the one that is way worse than just being frightened. It's actually a concentration effect by her. When frightened by this spell, a creature must take the dash action, move away from you from the safest possible route on each of its turns. So that's scary. They all are right now affected by the fear spell, which means they don't actually get to take their action. They have to take the dash spell. And then if they break line of sight, which everybody should, because the way the cave works for them, that's actually pretty advantageous, especially if you're dashing, then they can remake the save and try to end the effect, although there's no guarantee they would do that. So first, they all take that wraith damage, right, because they start their turn within 10 feet. Then they have to dash away on their first turn from her, which may incurs attack of opportunity from some of them. And then if they're out of line of sight, then they can repeat the save. And then meanwhile, she's going to be doing stuff on her turn. And, you know, it might be that she times it where she can stay in line of sight, in which case they're screwed. And then the wraith will be doing his thing. So it'll be really nasty. Now, if the party gets deliciously separated at all during this fight, then I could see Tekalele making an appearance and doing his thing, where he jumps in and attacks them. I got to be careful because I don't necessarily want to, like, you know, completely murder the party here. So I'm going to try to gauge the balance as well as I can. But using this as an ambush predator has been kind of fun, and I hasn't really used it in a super meaningful way so far, just because the players are so strong. And even though I bumped him up to be the stats of a regular vampire, it hasn't been necessarily the scariest thing. So I think if I have the opportunity, I will. In fact, Lazy DM even says to really use the vampire in all this fight is going to be really big and difficult for the party. Yeah. So timing wise, it'll have to be right, and I think it would be really good if the players even, because look at that, there's 2 different places they can run towards. They can run back the way they came into the Shadow Cave, and they can run here towards H16, which as written is supposed to have a psychic haunting, but I think I'm going to remove that and just have it be an empty cave. I think I had like a haunting in H12 instead. They could also run down to 22, which does have a psychic haunting. I did put one in there, but I'll probably wait until they're fully exploring that room. But yeah, I gotta take, especially because his lair is so close here. I could have him come in and he can do, you know, he's got legendary actions that lets him go into mist form and come out and do his bite attack. And previously, I think I just had him do his bite. He can technically do his bite and his claws. His cackle actually affects everybody within 120 feet. I could do that, but I think that also does the frightened effect, and they could become immune to it for 24 hours. So I might wait until they're actually like going towards the vampire lair to do that. But Sickening Gaze I could use maybe, and I did give him the ability, I think, yeah, for legendary actions he can use any of its actions except multi-attack. So basically he can use any of his 1 attacks or use Frightful Cackle or Sickening Gaze as a legendary action. He can move up to its speed without provoking opportunity attacks. I just gave him legendary actions specifically for like ambush predator mode. So hopefully he's a little more effective in that way. But yeah, that could be a pretty satisfying little fight there. I don't know how useful for Valen. You know, they've got this ally wizard who's not supposed to be a pushover, but all of her attacks are like necrotic based, and all of the enemies in here have been undead so far. I'm pretty sure. I mean, a Dread Wraith's got to be immune to necrotic. A vampire, like she's got chill touch. Although it does say the target can't regain hit points, which is useful to do against the vampire. Although, do they have to take the necrotic to have that happen? So that's not useful. She does not have Embracer Defense and Wand of Magic Missiles. The players all use those items, which is fine. Animate Dead she has used. She's got one skeleton. I think the other one died earlier. And then Plight also does necrotic damage, doesn't it? Yeah. She's a necromancer, and there's just not a good. It's a bad build. It's a bad build. Hold Person could maybe affect the vampire or any of the vampire spawn, so that could maybe be more useful. I think they count as humanoid, or do they count as undead? I don't know if actually undead can be held. That's a good question. And Raven Fieldman just seems kind of a dumb spell. Target deals only half damage with weapon attacks to use strength until the weapon ends. Actually, that's not too bad. That's probably a fair thing to do. Is everything considered a weapon attack, or is it not, though? It's like Tikkalele doesn't use weapons, uses his own claws. Dread Wraith doesn't use claws. But I think the way the mechanics work, don't they all count as like melee weapon? Yeah, melee weapon attack. Technically, the way the mechanics work, life drain's a melee weapon attack, so it doesn't really matter. So yeah, she would actually be able to use Brave Enfeeblement that use strength. This thing doesn't use strength. This thing has got to use dex. Dex is 4. So that would not work on the Dread Wraith. So yeah, unfortunately, Valen, even cantrip-wise, I need to give her like a firebolt or something. Like her only cantrip is chill touch. I feel bad that she's just kind of useless. She has no even like a dagger or something. Or Dispel Magic doesn't have that either. They should have kept what's his name alive? Zahn. But I believe he died in the Nautiloid crash. Got Detect Magic, Ray of Sickness, where it takes poison damage, which again is going to be, you know, all these guys I think are immune to poison, are they not? Yep, immune to necrotic and poison for the Wraith. Actually, the vampire's not even resistant to poison and only resistant to necrotic. So yeah, I think that would still be good against the Null Vampire. She would absolutely be screwed on the Wraith. But she could still do things like Ray of Sickness and even Chill Touch. Ooh, Tasha's Hideous Laughter. Yeah, Incapacitated could be really good. Are people armed, exhausted, grappled, paralyzed, petrified? Yeah. That would be weird to cast Tasha's Hideous Laughter on a Wraith. Break one attack, everything should be an ally to the Wraith. That's a really good question, Nate. You know, she actually asked me this like weeks ago, and I don't remember what I said, and now I'm still not sure how I want to rule that. Technically, I think they would not be allies to each other. They would both be affected by... Well, I would say this. They're probably not allies to each other, but they would both have their sights set on the others. So the Wraith would definitely want to destroy all the living creatures. Now, the Wendigo is technically living. But she is also cursed, kind of in a similar way to the Wraith. The Wraith was also cursed. He just became undead instead of a Wendigo. Which, if I had really planned things out better, maybe I could have had another Wendigo appear. But it wouldn't have worked out, I think, because this creature needed to be undead. So, I don't maybe an undead Wendigo a little bit. Maybe this is what maybe this is the final stage. What happens if you're cursed with the Wendigo form and you cannot eat anything and you eventually die? Then you're turned into this like massive, powerful Wraith thing. I could flavor it like that, but yeah, I don't plan on. I don't know basically if how they're going to interact with each other too much, but I think they would both prioritize the others a little bit more than each other. But if the players try to work around that, like they just try to run away and do that, then I could see where you could have them, the and whatnot be saying, let them fight. Have the two monsters fight each other if the players are that prescient. But hopefully there'll be enough chaos where it necessarily won't come up. But I think my ruling is that they are not allies to each other, but at the moment they prioritize other targets versus each other. Although we're about to have them all like scatter like roaches because they've all been feared. In fact, you could even have Celeste run further into this room, maybe, if that would count. Well, probably not, because you don't run away from her, and that's would be the best way. Man, Celeste is gonna fucking take off like a shot. When she uses the dash action, holy shit. She is going to run like, what, what is her fucking speed? Which, by the way, they just short rested, so thankfully they're actually in good shape for this fight. Her speed is 60, so when she dashes, she goes 120 feet in another direction. That's hilarious. Like, she is definitely going to be making another save. And I guess it's up to her on where she wants to run back to. Or she could run this way. All the way deep into here. That's crazy. Yeah, her target would definitely be her former allies for sure. Versus the Wraith. And the Wraith would target living, which technically the Wendigo is living. So, and it would just indiscriminately, ragefully kill everybody. But maybe it would see a slightly kindred spirit with the Wendigo form, having it be cursed with the thing that also basically cursed this Wraith creature. So that's basically how I'm going to rule it. In terms of how I want to run the Wraith, it's going to want to prioritize all the creatures, unless literally the Wendigo is the only thing around it, then it will attack the Wendigo. And same thing for Frey, that's what I'll tell her. Like, you'd rather attack your party members, but if this creature is the only thing, that's got its sights on you, then you could see yourself taking it on as well. The only bummer is, hopefully that doesn't happen too early, because you want the players to feel the sting of that fight. And then if these two are just fighting each other, that obviously gets a lot less interesting. But then at that point, I can obviously have the Null Vampire make an appearance and start attacking them as well. And it can really throw down as much as it can. It just needs, look at all these tabs I've got open. It just needs to be able to escape, which thankfully I've got, between its ability to like legendary action, Misty Step away, essentially. I think it can escape from anything as long as it's not completely incapacitated or anything. I don't think it has, did I give it legendary resistance? I did. Okay, so even at that, it can't escape. And that way it can flee back to its lair, which for this little upper right point, there's this area H13 still has that dynamic lighting of craziness where it's all like stalagmites and hanging ropes with like bones and chimes on it, so the players make noise to alert basically the Cobalt Vampire spawn. If they make it through it without making noise, they can make it through this room, and then the vampire spawn will notice them because they're crawling on the walls. But if they do make noise, then I can have the spawn move out, and maybe even I've got some more up here that would spawn additional ones. Kind of like a video game where, like Assassin's Creed does this, where if you actually like you trigger like an alarm where people like sound up an alarm, it spawns new enemies on the board. It doesn't just alert people to your presence, but actually spawns new ones that wouldn't be there before. And I kind of like that idea too, as like a punishment for, sounding off an alarm. Suddenly you've got new enemies that basically appear from off map that come into play. And then these are just kind of creepy little ice statues that the kobolds built, which if you for some reason break them, that also would alert the kobold spawns to their location. And then it's just a bunch of fights in there. This is definitely a location where Tekalele would throw down and fight, but he would still retreat from here once a couple of the spawns get killed. And then he would retreat down here, which the players would be able to see. And then I've got another 4 down here that the players can fight again. So it's a lot of fighting with these creatures and taking down Tekalele. And what I need to do is really put some treasure in here that maybe the kobold spawns have gathered, because otherwise it's such a... I think it feels bad to do all of this and not get any treasure out of it. I mean, the treasure is that the vampire no longer hunts you if you kill it, and this is its resting place. But still, like, it feels like you should reward the players with something, even if it's just art objects, or ancient Netherese things or something, versus literal magic items, because they are kind of overburdened, and clearly Ithrin will have some good stuff for them. But it feels like I need to come up with something for them there. All right, I think that is going to do it for this Thursday edition of Crafting Icewind Dale. If you enjoy the content, please check out patreon.com/RogueWatson. Shouts to Platinum patrons Joe, Will, Thomas, Stan, William, Brandon, Genocider, David, Eclectic, Roleplay Roll, Christopher, Brian, William, David, Corey, Koa, 1337, Matthew, Big Nut, John, Infernus, Chris, and Scott. And gold patrons RPG, Papercrafts, Pretty Boy, and Yuma, Marcus, Dead Lizard, Lounge, Sam, Lumpy Spuds, Jerome, Nathan, Fast Like a Tortoise, Scott, Rufus, Caroline, and William. Thank you all very much for your support, and I will see you finally for Rime of the Frostmaiden tomorrow night.